There we go. All right. Good evening, everyone. Welcome. I want to just kind of introduce Native Prairie Association of Texas briefly before we get started for anyone who's new to our programming. Um, Native Prairies Association of Texas is a statewide organization. We are a land trust and cover all of Texas, but our Fayette Prairie chapter is in the 11 county area of Fayette County and the surrounding 10 counties. And we're primarily Blackland and Post Oak Savannah ecoregion. And our chapter's goal is to develop local programming, education, field trips, outreach, cooperative efforts in all things conservation and restoration, of course, focused on native prairie largely. And so we welcome you. And if I will leave links in the chat box so that you can, if you are not a member, we welcome you. If you are not familiar with our webpage, you'll be able to see where this is recorded. We will post it, and then you'll see our whole library of workshops that we've had previously, as well as past Zooms that you can watch, re-watch, share. And then lastly, keep an eye out for our upcoming calendar. Our 2026 calendar will be posted very shortly. And I am telling you, it is jam-packed. So we are really, really excited about that, including more Zoom presentations like this one. So I will turn over to Connie Shorties to introduce our presenter, and welcome. Thanks for being here.
Thanks, Marvelyn. We are super delighted tonight to have Elvis Hernandez with us. He is the General Manager of the Lost Pines Groundwater Conservation District. His education was in electrical engineering. He had a master's degree from Cornell, and he spent 12 years at Bell Labs and followed that by 20 years at Cisco Systems, where he basically monitored and managed big advanced networks. After his professional career, he transitioned to public service, and he used that big system management expertise on another very complex system, and that is our groundwater systems. He's had multiple roles with the Lost Pines Groundwater Conservation District over the last several years, and is now the general manager. I first met and talked with him a few years ago, and I was so impressed with his knowledge of groundwater and his really deep commitment to water issues. He and his wife, Roxanne, are committed members of Native Prairie Association of Texas, and they're restoring their property to native plants. And they received the 2015 Lone Star Land Steward Award, and that's a big deal. So, and they had the distinction of hosting the rare, almost extinct Houston toad on their land. So they must be doing a lot of things right. In any case, Elvis, we're so happy to have you here tonight. I'm going to turn it over to you. Thank you for being here.
My pleasure. Glad to be here. If anyone has any questions along the way, we'll try to address them along the way. And if not, please just hold your questions off to the end. But let me start by giving a little bit more background on how I got into groundwater. Back in 2018, 2019, there was a large permit application for groundwater at one of our neighboring properties. I sort of neighbor the Griffith League Ranch, which is a big 5,000 acre Boy Scout ranch over in Bastrop County. And so my wife and I got involved and contested that permit application. And then that started my journey with groundwater. After that case, there was a couple of things that I felt the Lost Pines Groundwater District needed to attend to and address. And so I reached out to my county judge, Bastrop County Judge Poppy at the time, and he appointed me to the board of directors. And then I was secretary treasurer for my first year. And then after that, I became president. I was president up until 3 months ago when our general manager resigned. And so then by rule, I took over as technically I am interim general manager at the moment. So that gets me here. So that's how I started. I just started as a regular citizen, and one thing led to another. Got on the board, became president, and now all of a sudden I found myself here as the interim general manager. So one thing just led to another. So I do want to state that I am here speaking as a private citizen. I'm not here representing the district, but I will try to do my best to address your issues and then stick with the facts. So here we are, future of local groundwater. Let me, there we go. So the agenda for today, and I hope to cover this all within the next hour. Basically a little bit of a tutorial on Aquifers 101, just kind of give you the basics of the aquifers here in Central Texas in particular. My expertise is in, what little expertise I do have is in Bastrop and Lee County. So we'll touch on that. Then I wanted to give you a bit of a history on the groundwater districts, and in particular the Lost Pines Groundwater Conservation District. Lost Pines covers Bastrop and Lee County. Then I wanted to touch a little bit on Texas groundwater laws and talk about the Groundwater Management Area 12. And then in terms of some hot topics that have been in the news lately, aquifer storage and recovery. And then I wanted to touch on large-scale production of groundwater. And then finally, I've got some drawdown and artesian head animations that I'd like to show you that are fresh from our hydrologist, about a week or two old. So with that, let's start with some acronyms and definitions, because this is like a whole new language that takes for a new board member coming onto any groundwater district, it takes about 6 months to a year to really get comfortable with the laws and the rules of the district. And there's quite a bit of acronyms and definitions. So the first one probably is Groundwater Conservation District, GCD. Basically, GCDs are the way Texas manages its groundwater. There are about 98 groundwater conservation districts in Texas. They're typically by counties. Some are small, like one county, and ours is 2 counties, Bastrop and Lee. And they vary. The way they're funded varies. Their rules vary. Their makeup in terms of the board of directors varies. So it's very localized, and each district is unique in that respect. Next acronym is a desired future condition, DFC. DFCs are one of the tasks that the groundwater districts must create. It is the desired aquifer condition 50 years from now. So the district negotiates this. Every 5 years, we come up with a desired future condition. And then from there, that kind of drives a whole bunch of management decisions. And I'll get into this, all of these more along the way during my talk. Next up, the groundwater management area. It's a group of groundwater districts, typically with a common aquifer, and they typically border one another. So it's at the GMA 12 where Lost Pines, that's where we negotiate the 50-year desired future condition. And I will get into the GMA and speak about that, because that's real important. The GAM, Groundwater Availability Model. It's basically the state-approved computer model for modeling groundwater availability, right? Pretty straightforward. It's regional in nature. It's not very accurate when it comes to localized impacts, but it's the best available science that we have at the time. at this time, I should say. And one thing that we do know about models, and I have a board member who always states this, so I'm going to take this from one of our board members, Mr. Texter. He always says that models, the one thing about models is that we know they're wrong and they're sometimes useful. So in this case, we've lately have some evidence that the groundwater model, this particular model, is under predicting drawdowns by about 20%. And so, and again, I'll get into all these later on in more detail. And then ASR, aquifer storage and recovery. It's basically an alternate source of water. It's a bank, basically like a savings account of water. So entities like Austin Water or Aqua Water Supply or LCRA, they're looking of taking some source of water. It could be either groundwater or surface water, and then they will inject it into the aquifer during times of plenty, and then during times of drought, they will recover and pump that water back out. So it's sort of like a reservoir, but underground. So some of the benefits of ASR is obviously there's no evaporation, unlike a reservoir. So that's some of the definitions and acronyms that I will be using throughout this presentation. And there's quite a bit. Again, it takes quite a bit of time to kind of get up to speed on all these terms. And well, here's let's go at it. So here we go. Conservation districts, groundwater conservation districts are the preferred method of managing groundwater in Texas, as they provide local underground management for conservation, protection, and the efficient use of groundwater resources. So these districts are authorized to manage the groundwater through activities like issuing permits. We have monitoring wells to monitor the water levels all throughout Bastrop and Lee County, for example, and preventing waste, and ensuring the long-term health of aquifers while protecting landowners' rights. So it's the way that Texas has devised to manage our groundwater is through GCDs. So here is a picture now of a three-dimensional model. So in the last 4 years, the Lost Pines has really invested heavily in new science, and our hydrologist spent a whole year effort and to map out the geology underneath Bastrop and Lee County. They've taken 2,000 oil and gas well logs and have input all that data into a computer program, which then mapped out the geology underneath Bastrop and Lee County. So this took about a year's effort. And so this is the foundation for everything else. Now that we had a mapping of the underground, then we could do all sorts of things like assign aquifers to wells and determine drawdown impacts, et cetera. So this was one of the first things that we did to really start to work on improving our science. And so what the takeaway from all this is that we've got lots of aquifers. On this particular picture, we've got 11 aquifers and the Colorado alluvium. These aquifers are basically like layers of a cake. And so each different color that you see represents a different aquifer formation. And then these layers, they crop up to the surface right about halfway through Bastrop County. And that's what's called the outcrop. And that is this area, let's see, we're looking at basically Bastrop County from the north to the south. The yellow area is the Colorado River alluvium running west to east. And then you'll see the various layers of the formation. The other thing you can note is there's a little disjointed area here If you can see my my mouse, if you do see my mouse, I
Yes,
hope
we can see it.
good. You see this disjoint here. Well, that's a fault line. It turns out that over in Lee County and North Bastrop County, we have several fault lines. And running up Highway 77 from Lee County into the Tanglewood area, we have a fault called the Tanglewood Graben, where literally there's a section of the earth that is just dipping down and I guess subsiding. It's not really subsidence. It's just it's because of the fault lines. It's actually lowering in elevation here, and so that's what you see here with this fault right here. So what's happening, as you can tell, is that these aquifers then become disjoint. So for example, look at this purple line. The purple line is nice and coherent. Oh, hit my mouse by accident. And then all of a sudden we come over to the fault line, and now all of a sudden that particular aquifer formation is disjoint from the other side, and it prevents water then from flowing across this fault line. So we've got faults to contend with. This outcrop area is real important. That's where the recharge zone is. That's where these aquifers crop up to the surface. And when it rains, that's where it recharges down into the aquifers. Now, in our aquifers, in our cases, we've got a lot of sand and clay soils. And that water that's down in these aquifers can be hundreds of years old. So the recharge is not like over in the hill country, where you've got these karsts and the limestone has these openings and caves where they fill up really quickly. This is not like that at all. These are highly compressed sands, saturated with water, and so this water has been down there hundreds of years. The water flows from west to east, and the water flows downhill, according, with gravity. So this water will be flowing from west to east, and flowing down this down dip. And so that's what's called the subcrop. So these aquifers, about halfway through Bastrop County, they really start heading downwards and getting very deep. And that's what's called the subcrop, or the down dip areas. And we'll get into that. So over towards the western half of the county, sort of, let's say Elgin, you start running out of aquifers. Over in Elgin, really, there's basically the Hooper aquifer to be able to drill into. But unlike here, like in Giddings, for example, we might have the Sparta Sand, the Wetches, the Queen City, the Reclaw, the Carrizo, and there's half a dozen different aquifers that someone could theoretically pump from and drill into. So the further west you go through Bastrop and Lee County, the fewer and fewer aquifers you have to tap into as these aquifers hit the outcrop. So I picked this one. This is not from the Texas area. So this is just a generalized, I guess, aquifer diagram. And I just thought that this was good to just describe some key items, some key terms. So here's the recharge area over on the left. So this is where the aquifer will outcrop to the surface. And so then when it rains, that rain could actually enter that aquifer. And then that aquifer typically will then down dip and then become a confined aquifer. And what that means is that it's pressurized, because there's compacting layers both above and below it. You could have clay layers, or in particular around here. And so also I want to note is what this is a little deceiving, because the aquifers here in Bastrop and Lee County, these are all sand soils. So right now it's kind of showing it like it's an ocean of water and it's all blue. Well, it's not. In our case, these wells are tapped into sands, and then they're screened off. They'll have screens in the sand area that would allow the water to get into that casing. And so some of the other concepts here is the water table. And so that's just the water line where the water would normally go reach a certain elevation. And then you'll see the artesian wells. And what that is that that well has been tapped into a confined aquifer, which is pressurized. And so that pressurizes the water and it forms sort of like a little geyser, like an oil geyser is the typical thing that comes to mind. And it'll geyser up into the surface. This could be a spring. So this is the way some springs work, where they're tapped down into a certain aquifer, and then they'll, due to the pressure, they'll flow up. So those are the flowing artesian wells. And then these other wells, so you have the water table down here in a confined area is at the level of this aquifer. And in this case, you have a water table well where you're drilled in, but there's no artesian head in this scenario. In this scenario, the water is at water level at the water table, unlike the artesian well where it's pressurized and the water is getting pushed up and up to the surface. In this case, over here, this water table well, that is a well that's unconfined. So it's not pressurized. And so the water is not flowing upward. It's not like a geyser. So it's not pressurized. So when you go and take the water level measurement on this water table, it's down here at the top of the aquifer, at the aquifer level. So just some concepts there. I guess the main thing is that these aquifers are within sands. And so in our case around here, it's not just a blue ocean of water. These wells will be drilled into sands, and then they're screened off. And then a pump would be put down in there to pump that water back out. So where do the aquifers store this water? Well, in our case, it's stored in between the grains of sands. So and in between layers of clay and sands, mostly here in Bastrop and Lee County. So you've got some space available, and in between that space, and of course, some of these aquifers could be hundreds of feet below the surface of the land. And so they're compacted quite a bit through time and gravity, and just pressure with all the weight of these clays pushing down and compacting these sands. And so in between the grain of sands, you've got the water. And how do the aquifers move this water? As I mentioned earlier, the water flows downhill, right, due to gravity. So and also from high pressure to low pressure. For our case, typically the water is flowing from west to east towards the Gulf and towards the down dip areas downhill. And so of course you've got friction and all sorts of things that opposes the motion. And so different aquifers have different rates of flow. Some aquifers, the water can flow faster than in other aquifers. So here's a map from our Lost Pines database. This is our well database that you can go to our website, www.lostpineswater.org, and you can click on the database, well database, and it'll bring up a map like this. And the red area here is the outcrop area for the Carrizo Wilcox. So that encompasses the Carrizo, the Calvert Bluff, the Simsboro, and the Hooper, all those four formations, and that's the red area. And so that's where the aquifer comes up to the outcrop and hits the surface. That's where the rain can recharge this area. And it's basically over Bastrop and Bastrop's western half, roughly. The very, very border of Bastrop and Travis County, you see it does not have that red area right on the borderline. So the aquifer there is I believe the Trinity Aquifer, which is quite deep, right on the county line. So the sweet spot for the drillers and the water and for wells is in this red area. This is where the wells are. Typically a domestic well is anywhere between 300 to 600 feet, roughly. Your typical domestic well, and on the eastern half of Bastrop, sort of halfway through the Bastrop State Park, and and over along Highway 21, the eastern half, you don't have the Carrizo Wilcox. What you do have is the Sparta, the Queen City, and the Reclaw over on the eastern half of the counties, and those are classified as minor aquifers. They still produce water. There's most of these domestic wells in the eastern half are in the Sparta, the Queen City, or the Reclaw. But the big water producers do not produce from the minor aquifers. The real big water producers produce from the Wilcox group. The Carrizo and the Simsboro are the two most prolific aquifer formations. So turning over a bit to the history of the Lost Pines, the Lost Pines Groundwater District was established by law and enacted by a public vote in 2002. The funding for the Lost Pines comes from permit fees. So as soon as a permit is granted, we start collecting fees on that permit. Other groundwater districts are different. Some districts are funded through taxes. I believe Fayette County GCD is funded through taxes. Another county to our north, Brazos Valley GCD, they're funded through production fees. So they have to have someone producing and actually pumping water, and then they get paid a fee for the amount that's actually pumped. We get paid regardless if you pump or not. As soon as the permit is granted, we start collecting fees. So that's interesting. Just different. Again, different. Each GCD tends to be pretty unique with different laws and the enabling acts that provide them with different regulations. The Lost Pines is comprised of 10 board members, 5 from Bastrop County and 5 from Lee County. They're 4-year appointments, and they're appointed by the county judge, respectively. So Bastrop County judge appoints the 5 from Bastrop, and they're for 4-year appointments. The Lost Pines Groundwater District is chartered to manage all the aquifers under Bastrop and Lee County. We govern all the groundwater well permits. So any new well requires a permit, whether it's a test well, a replacement well, exempt well, non-exempt, any new well. Anytime you're punching a hole in the ground to get water, you have to come to the groundwater district for a permit. And then within the last 4 years, we've spent hundreds of thousands of dollars in hydrologic research, the 3-dimensional mapping that I showed earlier. And then we've done a lot of aquifer and well impact studies. We did a monitoring well study to determine where would we best have monitoring wells to best get collect data for the water levels. We invested in a new well database, and we're currently working on a new groundwater model locally for the Lost Pines, and that should be available next year in 2026. So a lot of focus on science has been spent on the last 4 years. Now, the Lost Pines is real small. A lot of these districts are small. Our staff is basically, we have 3.5 persons on staff. Myself as the interim general manager. We have an office manager, education and outreach coordinator, and then someone that works from home just doing data entry into our database. So we don't have a large staff. Our office is in Giddings, Texas. And we do have consultants on retainer for lawyers and hydrologists, which are a big part of our team. So this next slide shows one of the studies that we did. We asked our hydrologists to come up with a recommendation as to the best place to have monitoring wells. So these are monitoring water levels throughout the various different aquifers throughout both Bastrop and Lee County. So the groundwater districts are in charge of monitoring groundwater levels to determine if we're meeting the desired future conditions. And it's an important function of the groundwater district is to collect data on these aquifers and data on the wells. So whenever a new well is drilled, that well driller must create a report and submit it to the state of Texas. And then they also provide us with that driller report. In that report, there's all sorts of information about the well depth, what the static water level was when they drilled a well. If there's pump information, we'll get the pump depth, the size of the pump. All that information is then input into our database. So you can see all these purple squares, and a lot of them up in the Lexington area, up in the upper north corner of Lee County. You see there's many more wells than everywhere else. And that is because that area has seen a substantial amount of drawdown in the last 4 years. There's a project right along the county line, just north of Lee County in Burleson County. And that project is called Vista Ridge. And that went online in 2021. And they're producing from Burleson County and then pumping that water and piping it to San Antonio. And once that project started, our wells in Lexington started to become impacted by due to those water level drawdowns. So we've had to really focus in on that Lexington area. So if you know anybody that lives in southern Bastrop County, we are looking for additional wells in monitoring wells in southern Bastrop County, FYI. So if there's anyone that might know someone or have property there, please reach out to me. We'd love to have your well as a monitoring well. All right, this next slide shows our public well database. Again, you can go to www.lostpineswater.org. And then you can click on well database. There's a big icon down in the middle, and that'll bring you to our database map. We have about 5,000 wells in our database. And then when we get a new well drilled, we put in that data, the GPS coordinates, all the information that we have about that well, and then we start and then water level measurements, and then subsequently, as we collect water levels, we'll enter it into this database. So super important to keep good data, have good data coming into the data. This is very similar along the lines where when I worked for Cisco Systems. One of my expertises was in monitoring large voice over IP networks. And the key thing is having sensors, collecting data, putting good data into the database, and then being able to have reports and being able to do trend analysis and being able to analyze that data. So it's super important. And when I got on the board, I made this my priority to get a really good data and database and processes in place. So it's still work in progress, but we've made tons of strides moving forward. So a little bit about groundwater law, and here I'm probably going to get myself maybe into. I'm going to try to keep it as high level and as possible. I am not a lawyer, but I do work with lawyers, and it's super important to understand the groundwater laws. Texas groundwater law is based upon the rule of capture. So it's an English common law precedent set in 1843 and adopted in Texas in 1904. So basically the rule of capture is you put your pump in, you drill your well, and then you just start pumping, and you pump and pump as much as you want. So that was in place, and that is what's the rule of capture. Now the groundwater districts do have authority to implement production limits. And the Lost Pines, several years ago, we implemented production limits based upon surface acreage. And this is a concept that's called correlative rights. Or it's also called fair share. So right now, typically in the state of Texas, GCDs that have implemented correlative rights, typically you'll see, it's very common to see about 1 to 2 acre feet of water per acre of land. That is typically a very common allocation for an acre of land, is somewhere between 1 to 2 acre feet of groundwater. So that is something that GCDs, one of the tools that GCDs can use to manage the aquifers. Some things of note in our Texas law, and there's some definitions that are quite interesting. Let me just say that. One of them is the definition of beneficial use. So when someone applies for a groundwater permit, they have to prove that that the groundwater will be used for beneficial use. But the definition in law of beneficial use is basically it's anything deemed beneficial by the owner. So basically anything and everything is beneficial. That's a little strange. That could be improved. And then also there's a definition of unreasonable impacts or lax definition. So our laws uses this term unreasonable impacts, but it's not well defined. And so inevitably you end up in court arguing one lawyer versus another lawyer in terms of what is an unreasonable impact. So that could be improved. So there's lots of things I believe that are just low-hanging fruit that we could improve in our laws that would go a long way. And so GCDs, we must balance property rights with the highest practicable production. Some folks have water rights and they want to conserve their groundwater, and others do not. Others have groundwater rights. They own the land, they own that groundwater, and they want to sell their water. And both must be respected. Both have property rights. And so that is the difficult one. Obviously this is a difficult task to try to manage expectations and different landowners with different priorities. So groundwater law, unlike oil and gas here in Texas, is not well litigated. Oil and gas issues have been litigated for over 100 years. And so there's a lot of precedents in law, and that's resolved a lot of outstanding issues and concerns and questions. With groundwater, we're just getting started. There's not a lot of groundwater law. There's a big case in Supreme. It was called the Day case, I believe. You might want to look that up. That is the big groundwater case that kind of has set a precedent, and you'll hear that touted quite a bit or referred to. But in general, with groundwater and all the issues and concerns, that the next decade is probably going to be a decade filled with groundwater litigation. It's already going on. We have over in the Hill Country, I think it's Hayes County, with Aqua Texas, where they went over their permit, and they are stating that by law they had to pump that water because they have to provide, as a utility, they had to provide water to certain homes, and so they believed that they were obliged to pump that water. And then the groundwater district had put, I believe, some sort of curtailment in place, or was trying to limit that water. And now they're in litigation in terms of did they truly violate their permit? Did they pump too much? And does the state have priority with their law, where it forces Aqua Water Texas to have to pump to meet the demands of their customers? So things, there's all sorts of issues that are just getting started. Another interesting tidbit in groundwater law is just the price of water. So you would figure with a commodity that's so in need, and a commodity that is not infinite, it's finite. You would think that the price might be a deterrent, or some, would have something in the pricing to deter or not deter. Well, the pricing of groundwater is really, really inexpensive. It's about 3.8 cents per 1,000 gallons. And for agricultural wells, for agricultural irrigation, it's even less expensive. It's about 0.31 cents per 1,000 gallons. So that is an indication of the priorities, obviously, with agriculture and irrigation. But this might be something, again, to be looked at by our legislature in terms of the pricing. And being able to maybe price differently. So, they already do it with agricultural wells, are priced lower. Maybe we need some sort of scaled pricing. Let's see, third bullet item, an export permit cannot be treated differently than any other permit. So all permits must be treated exactly the same. We can't prioritize or be biased against one permit or another. You can't be biased versus one company versus another company, or some endeavor. And so if somebody wants to use the water for agricultural, that cannot be treated any different than someone that wants to use the water to export, than someone that needs the water for a local city or a local utility. And that recently, there was a bill recently filed that started to chip away at this, where they're starting to look at possibly having a priority for local groundwater. And that's something that the legislature, I believe, is going to look at in their next session. Groundwater districts can establish well spacing and property line spacing requirements, again, to try to manage the aquifers and manage the impacts. We do have well spacing requirements for the big producers producing large amounts. They have to be within 5,000 feet of any other neighboring well in the same aquifer, for example. So this is another tool in the toolbox to be able to try to manage the aquifers, is by establishing well spacing and property line spacing requirements. All right, some legal concerns, or things that are legalese type stuff that I like to say. They're not exactly specific to any specific laws, but in general, the groundwater districts are pretty common with that. Our permit applications it's common to have large permit applications be contested. A groundwater permit can be contested by the public or any entity with a direct and unique impact. That's how I got involved. My wife and I got involved with an LCRA permit, and we contested that permit application. So it's very typical for large permits. I know there's a big permit in East Texas that's very controversial lately, and that looks like it stirred up a whole bunch of issues, and with folks trying to contest that particular permit application. Another thing to note is that it's not all fun and games being on the board of directors of a groundwater district. In the Lost Pines area, our directors have been personally and individually sued, both in Texas State District Court and in federal court, over permit disputes and over permit issues. Luckily, at the time, our representative Cyrier and Governor Abbott several years ago filed a bill that quickly passed into law that prohibits directors from being individually personally sued in state court. So that was a law that was passed as a result of the Lost Pines directors being sued. But then subsequently, the Lost Pines in a different dispute was personally sued individually in federal court. So just FYI for any, so state court. So when you do contest a permit, when a groundwater permit is contested, one of the options is to send that contested case to the state court. It's called SOA, a State Office of Administrative Hearings, I believe. And so the SOA court will review and hold a hearing with expert witnesses and expert testimony, and then they will make a recommendation to the groundwater district about that permit. There was a big, large groundwater permit just to our north, and even though there was evidence that showed unreasonable impacts as a result of that permit application, the SOA recommended that since the impacts were not imminent, that permit should be granted. So the state courts and SOA had the recommendation in that particular case that even though there was sufficient evidence and they recognized that, yes, this permit application would have unreasonable impacts to the aquifers and to neighboring wells, those impacts were determined to be about 20 years away. And so the court said, well, it's not imminent, you should grant the permit. So that's where the judicial side of things lie. So the desired future conditions, I touched upon this earlier, that's the future aquifer condition for 50 years from now, say in the year 2070, 2080. The process to establish those DFCs at the GMA, it's not really well defined in law. And as a result, there are inconsistent methods between the groundwater districts and how they come up with the DFCs. And even from one cycle to another cycle, they're 5-year cycles, they're inconsistent methods. So that is a concern that I've had lately. So additionally, many of the social economic studies that are performed by the state are largely demand driven, and they focus on the economic impacts if the cities do not have water, if there's not enough water for the state. And so they're very focused on demand driven economic impacts of not having water. As I mentioned earlier, the state model, the GAM, is not accurate really to represent local impacts very accurately. The modeling really does require more state funding. The groundwater district to our north, the Post Oak Savannah Groundwater Conservation District, a couple in the last 2-3 years, they've spent about $500,000 to create their own local model. And right now that model is showing them that the GAM, the state model, is underestimating drawdown by about 20%. So the Post Oak is now reaching out to the state to try to see if their new model could be adopted by the state in order to improve our local models. And again, many groundwater districts are quite small. Some are taxpayer funded. And as a result, they don't have the funds to perform all these scientific studies and to deal with all these legal costs. So we're lucky in the Lost Pines in that we are funded from the permits. And so we do have money coming in, even though our 3 largest permits have not produced any groundwater at all so far. So we have 3 very large permits and they have yet to pump. But because we are permit-based, we do collect their fees. And so that does allow us to invest in scientific studies. And that is a luxury that some smaller groundwater districts do not have that. The Groundwater Management Area 12, it's probably the most important state entity you've never heard about. Your groundwater is controlled at the regional level at the GMA 12. The GMA 12 consists of 5 groundwater districts. So from south to north, It's Fayette County, or half of Fayette County, the Lost Pines, the Post Oak Savannah, the Brazos Valley, and the Mideast Texas Groundwater Conservation Districts. Those are the 5 GCDs that consist of the GMA 12. And at the GMA 12, every 5 years, there's a 5-year cycle where we have to negotiate the DFC for the next 50 years. What is the desired future aquifer condition for each of the groundwater districts in that GMA? So all this is defined in law. The Texas law defines the GMA 12. It defines the GCDs that comprise the GMA 12, and it takes a 4/5 supermajority vote to approve the desired future conditions every 5 years. Currently, we're in year 4 of the 5-year cycle. So we've got 1 year left, and we are in the midst of finalizing the negotiations for the next cycle, the 2026 DFCs. And 4 out of the 5 groundwater districts in the GMA 12 wish to keep our desired future condition the same and not increase the DFC any further this cycle. So the GCDs, one thing about the GCDs and permittees and these permits is that you don't have to pay for your damages that are caused as a result of your permit. So permittees can voluntarily establish a mitigation program to fix wells that have been impacted from their permit. Most do not do that. But typically, a mitigation program is a condition of the permit application. And when the permit application is granted, usually the groundwater district, they can put and negotiate a condition to establish a mitigation program to fix mostly domestic wells in case that permit causes an impact to the neighboring domestic wells. But they don't have to. The groundwater districts do not have to fix the wells. The permittees do not have to fix the damages as a result of their permits. But that's something that the groundwater districts, we try to push and we've established mitigation programs because it's the right thing to do. In the Lost Pines, we're being impacted by the Post Oak Savannah permit of Vista Ridge. Within 6 months of Vista Ridge going online, we've had wells that we've had to fix because of the water level drawdowns. So each district can create their own program. As of 2023, when a law was passed that explicitly allowed GCDs to establish mitigation programs. But typically, the groundwater districts will only mitigate within their own district. So if they're causing impacts to a neighboring district, they don't have to pay those debt for those impacts, and they don't right now. All right, moving along, aquifer storage and recovery. This is a concept that is endorsed basically by the state legislature. Most every big city or water producer, I think, has a plan for some sort of aquifer storage and recovery. So for example, WSC, water supply company here in Bastrop, they have plans to pump groundwater and then inject it back into the aquifer. So basically, again, like a bank account. And they're looking at a proposed location in Bastrop over by Highway 95 and Pershing Drive. In addition to Aqua Water Supply, you have Austin Water. This has been in the news lately, and it's been a big item here in Bastrop over the last month. Austin Water has plans to take their treated drinking water and pipe it with a pipeline over to the Page, Texas area, and then treat it, and then inject it either into the Carrizo or into the Simsboro aquifer, roughly about 800 or 1,200 feet below ground. Austin Water will need about 7,000 acres of land. The advantage of ASR is there's no evaporation loss because the water is being stored underground. The one thing to note is that there have been past ASR projects in Texas, but they have all been within their own county. So this Austin Water project is, to my knowledge, would be the first project where an ASR would be outside their own county. So they're looking to put the ASR in Bastrop County. ASR is one of several alternate water sources that most cities, big cities, and it's desired by the Texas legislature. The legislature has allocated billions of dollars in incentives for ASR, for desalination, and for brackish water production. And with Prop 4 just passing the other day, that is going to provide $1 billion a year for some of these efforts, in addition to fixing leaking pipes and fixing broken infrastructure and desalination. And also ASR is one of the tools in that toolbox there. So there's a lot of money to incent entities to look at ASR. The issue that we have at the Lost Pines Groundwater District is that we do not have authority over ASR projects. So the groundwater districts, as I mentioned earlier, we manage everything about the groundwater, and we are the sort of the keepers of the ground of the aquifers. Well, with every respect, except for ASR. When it comes to ASR, the permitting authority is with the state. The Texas Commission of Environmental Quality, TCEQ, has the permitting authority over all ASR projects in the state of Texas. So that is a little strange. And here is the water code, the law, section 36.454, that says the district may not require a permit or for the completion of an ASR injection or recovery well that is authorized by the commission. And that means the Texas Commission of Environmental Quality, TCEQ. So we do not have local control over ASR projects. ASR, so one more slide on this. By law, the groundwater districts do not have permit authority over ASR. As long as that ASR project does not take out more than it puts in, then it does not need a permit from the groundwater district. And the TCEQ is the authority that permits ASR projects in Texas. The Lost Pines, we've been negotiating with Austin Water since April to have a seat at the table and to be part of their technical team. Finally, in June, Austin Water agreed, and we worked on an agreement to allow our hydrologists at the Lost Pines to be part of the technical advisory group. We believe that this will provide the Lost Pines an opportunity to fully participate in the feasibility of this particular ASR, of the Austin Water ASR project in Page. And so we have lots of concerns about this project. The well chemistry, the water chemistry, of the interaction between the treated surface water with the chemical reactions of the pristine aquifer water is a big concern. The test injection of using similar water, not the same water as the treated water, and unknown withdrawal rates, the impacts to local wells, remediation plans, remediation bonds and funds. There are lots and lots and lots of concerns over the long-term phase 2 project of Austin Water. Phase 2 is where they actually start injecting water into the aquifer as a test. Now that won't occur for the next 2 to 3 years. So Austin Water ASR is at least 8 years away. Their next phase is phase 1B. That's within the next 2 to 3 years. It poses no harm or threat to the aquifers. It's purely laboratory testing. They're going to drill 2 test wells, and then they will bring up core samples and water samples, and then spend about 2 to 3 years in doing laboratory testing. And this is where the Lost Pines will have a seat at the table. We will be part of that team, and we will be helping to analyze that data, collect the data, and work with Austin to determine whether this project is feasible or not from a science perspective. The Austin Water ASR location is down dip from the city of Bastrop. As I explained earlier, the water flows from west to east, and it flows due to gravity downhill. So, and the Austin Water Page area, the 800 to 1,200 feet should be deep enough that it should not impact the city of Bastrop to any large extent. More concern should be is the LCRA Aqua and Recharge are big producers, and they've got big production wells just west of Page. And so those wells are probably would be impacted or could be impacted more so relative than the city of Bastrop. And so obviously more tests, more data is needed. Page and Smithville are of concern. They're closer to that area. The exact location has not been decided yet. So we don't know. I don't know the exact location of this particular project. Austin Water project does take these 7,000 acres off the market from a production point of view. They've committed that they will not produce water or pump water from this land. They will only take the water that they put in, and they have to take out less than what they put in. The bigger issue for the Lost Pines that we believe is more of a concern and more eminent is large scale production. So there's large scale export permits and large scale production of the aquifers. There's 3 large permits in the Lost Pines that have yet to start. When they do, that's when the drawdowns are predicted to really go down quite substantially. What's happening is that groundwater from the rural areas east of I-35 that are sitting on top of the Carrizo-Wilcox aquifer, it's typically areas east of I-35. That groundwater is being mined and then transported to the big I-35 cities. So just north, I've got a map of this, but just north of Lee County, there's a big project, as I mentioned, called Vista Ridge. They're pumping tens of thousands of acre feet of water a year, and they're piping that to San Antonio. Over in Brazos Valley, there's a new permit that's piping 50,000 acre feet of water every year planned to Georgetown. Just to the south of Bastrop, there is a production that's underway. They're about to start off that's called GBRA. And that water from Caldwell County, just on the other side of the Bastrop County line, that's going to San Marcos. So one model run predicts that within the next 10, 15 years, all of the groundwater permits in the Lost Pines area will be required to be cut back by 35% in order to meet our desired future conditions. And our DFCs is to keep 50% remaining artesian head on average. So that's our DFC for the year 2070. We're trying to keep half of our artesian head remaining. Now, mind you, this is just one of many possible outcomes. There's all sorts of variables. Permits could be bought out. Permits could not come to fruition within the next 10 years. So depending on how fast these permits come online, depending on how fast they ramp up, different possible outcomes certainly could occur. But our model predicts one outcome could be pretty devastating. And I've got a animation that will show this. So here's a map of the location of the notable Simsboro wells. Simsboro is by far the most prolific aquifer. This is where all the big guys pump from. Up here in Brazos County, Brazos Valley Groundwater District, Robertson County, you've got number 1. That's Brazos Farms. That's being pumped to Georgetown. You've got number 4 and 5. Obviously, College Station, Texas A&M. They use a lot of water locally, and have been historically, and they're growing, and they need a lot of water. So they're asking for more and more water in Brazos Valley. They're asking to increase the desired future conditions. as we head south from Brazos Valley GCD, in the blue, you've got the Post Oak Savannah GCD. That's Milam and Burleson County. And you've got number 11. That's the Vista Ridge project. And that number 11, that water is going to San Antonio. You've got item number 10. This is SLR, Sandal Lakes Ranch. This used to be the Alcoa mines. And a lot of this water has been granted and a contract signed to provide water to the new Samsung plant in Taylor, for example. And I know of that one customer for SLR is Samsung. I believe they're also in the works to try to sell some of that water to Pflugerville and other locations up and down I-35. Then down in our area in Lee County, we have our own big permits. These have not started. 6, 7, and 8 have not started in the Lost Pines. It's Gatehouse is number 6. Recharge is number 7. They have some wells. They have a well field in southern Lee County, and they have a well field in northern Bastrop County is number 7. That Recharge. And then we have LCRA. That is along Highway 21 in Bastrop County, just north of the city of Bastrop. And that's 8,000 acre feet. And that's number 8. The ASR project is just a little east and south of number 7. And so that's the ASR. That's sort of the general area where just south of Page. And so I just wanted to give you some scaling and reference as to these various big well fields. And then south, what's not shown on this picture is in southern Bastrop County, just across the Bastrop County line, there's the GBRA project, and that's taking water and piping it over to San Marcos. So a summary of the impacts. So we did some impact studies. We determined that the Lost Pines does not impact any neighboring groundwater district to any large degree. 4 out of the 5 groundwater districts in the GMA 12, we are largely impacted from outside production for which we have no control over. So in our case, in the Lost Pines, we have that big Vista Ridge project, which is right on the Lee County borderline with Burleson County. And so these projects are right on the county line. And so the impacts is a cone of depression. The impacts are in a circular cone. And so half of the impacts are in Lee County. And so to my third bullet, we've had to mitigate impacts from the Vista Ridge production that's right on the county line. So far, the Lost Pines has spent over $500,000 since 2021 to mitigate over 70 wells in and around the Lexington, Texas area in Lee County. So the issue there is that Post Oak gets the revenue from Vista Ridge. They're getting all the fees. So they're collecting millions of dollars a year in production fees or in fee. I don't know if it's production or permit fees, but in fees, they're collecting millions of dollars. But half of the impacts are felt by the Lost Pines. And we've had to pay the mitigation to fix and make our well owners whole. And then when we reached out to Post Oak and asked to be repaid, they denied that request. And so they right now they don't want to pay for the damages caused by Vista Ridge. And Vista Ridge, I believe, is a for-profit entity. And so you've got this for-profit entity, and we're paying for the damages caused by them. So there was a new bill introduced that went into law. It was put in. The bill was put in by Representative Gertis, who represents Post Oak and the Lost Pines area, to allow payments across GCDs. And so we're hopeful that Post Oak will now join with us to have a program where they can help us mitigate and pay for those damages. Here's an example of a mitigation cost these days, given the inflation. The cost of drilling a new well is really expensive. You're looking at $36,000 to drill a new well these days, roughly on average. So with that, let me show you some animated drawdown maps. These are from our hydrologist. And let me bring that up. And let me make sure I'm sharing. Can you see these maps?
Yes, I can see them on the left-hand side, your
Right.
slide deck there.
Yep, perfect. All right, so I'm going to blow this up. So here is our GMA 12 models. So you're looking at the groundwater management area 12 regional area. And this is our PS4.
Oh, Elvis, I may not be, I'm seeing your slide that says animated drawdown and artesian head and your
Okay.
slide deck on the side.
Got
So
it.
I'm probably not seeing it.
Right, let me share again. So let me share the proper window.
Okay, now I'm seeing a map.
Yep. All right. So what this is the PS4-1 model run. What that means is we are in the fourth cycle. This is the fourth fifth year cycle. Every cycle is 5 years. This is the fourth cycle we are in. And this was the first model run, official model run that the GMA 12 created, that hydrologists created. What you're seeing is the GMA 12 area comprised of these counties. And you can see this is what happens. This is all of our permits. So this is all the permits in the GMA 12 running full blast. And so you can see some epicenters here in Brazos. You can see the Vista Ridge epicenter just on Burleson County. And you see these circles, and they start growing, and the blob starts growing, and then the blobs combine here in Burleson County. And Burleson County gets the brunt of it because they have not only do they have Brazos Valley, Texas A&M to their north, but then they got Vista Ridge to their south. And so Burleson County is predicted that they could have up to 800 to 900 feet of drawdown in the next 40, 50 years. So this is a scenario that is would be very impactful. And you see how these blobs just grow, and they start out at these epicenters of these focal points, and then they grow. You do see in Lee County, you do see Gatehouse. So if you take a look just in that northern Lee County, there's that Gatehouse, and then it meshes in with Vista Ridge, and then they both,
Elvis,
yeah.
and I know we're going to have a lot of questions, and it's 7:15, so I wanted to leave some time for that.
Yep. Yeah, I'm basically done with this. This is give me 2 more minutes. This map is a little different. This one is a map of a remaining artesian head. And so this is showing that what's happening is the artesian head is going to zero along the outcrop area. And then it moves from west to east. And it starts in the outcrop, and then it grows easterly in the outcrop. And you can see the artesian head declining over the next years. So this is the model run number 2. This is what we're advocating, which is to keep the current DFCs. So we want to keep the current desired future condition. And even in this scenario, we're looking at 400 to 500 foot drawdowns in the Simsboro, in Burleson County, Northern Lee County. All right. So now let me get back to my other slide and go back to Zoom and share. All right, so with that, conclusions. Our aquifers are over permitted. All of the groundwater is accounted for. There is no spare groundwater. If a groundwater district does try to deny a permit in order to try to quote save that groundwater, they're not saving it. It's just going to be taken by a neighboring groundwater district or another permittee. So all the groundwater is accounted for. It doesn't make sense for a groundwater district to curtail if their neighboring groundwater district isn't also curtailing, because you're not saving the water. Your neighboring groundwater district will just take that water from you. So we're in a situation where we need to manage an orderly and slow depletion of these aquifers, and that's just to keep around about 100 good years of water for the next 100 years. Instead, if we don't do anything, we're heading towards a rapid and disruptive damage to the aquifers within the next 50 years if we don't manage these declines. And so we need alternate sources of groundwater. And all right, I'm going in the wrong direction. Sorry about this. So some of the alternate sources of groundwater that we need to really invest in: brackish groundwater from the deep aquifers that where the water is salty and hot, but we could treat it. Desalinization, rainwater harvesting, reducing reuse and recycle, fixing leaking broken infrastructure, and stop watering lawns. Leaking pipes take up about 10 to 15% of the water loss in the cities due to broken infrastructure, and about half of municipal water is used to irrigate lawns. That's it. Question time.
Thank you, Elvis. Boy, my profound ignorance about groundwater is exposed now. So thank you for taking us through this in such a structured way. And so, yeah, we'll open it to questions. I think Marvelin's going to kind of wrangle some of the chat questions that have come in, and you're also welcome to raise your hand or unmute, and we'll try to manage that process as well so that everybody, as many people as possible, can ask questions of Elvis. So thanks.
Elvis, are you able to see the chat questions?
Yeah.
Okay,
Yes,
so
yeah.
I've noticed that Andy and Gary, and I don't know if you are familiar with them, but they have some really great questions that I hesitate to reword them for you because they they clearly know what they're talking about. So if you don't mind kind of running through those and speaking to some of the conversation that they are providing. And then I also see that Bryce has his hand up. So while you take a minute to read through Andy and Gary's comments and questions and kind of speak to them maybe collectively, I'm going to go ahead and ask Bryce to go ahead and ask his question, and not to, uh, move him to the top, but I want to give Elvis a chance to read through those and collect his thoughts on that. So Bryce, if you would go ahead and ask your question.
Yeah, Elvis, a great presentation. I think one of the saddest things is the state legislature doesn't have the willingness, and the governor doesn't have a willingness to really redo these laws, because the primary problem is that the groundwater district should not be the way we regulate groundwater. It should be on a aquifer basis, just like in Bexar County. I'm in San Antonio in Bexar County, and the Edwards Aquifer Authority is the only groundwater entity that does it by aquifer, and because of that, it's the most successful. And in fact, in San Antonio, we have ASR that's been out there several years, and in May of 2024, it had already its storage was 155,000 acre feet. So I would really encourage you to do your ASR program. I surely wouldn't be fearful of it. And we also have a in fact, that ASR may be one of the largest in the nation. and I wish y'all would study that. And then the desal, we have a very successful desal program here in Bexar County for the San Antonio water system. But I wish y'all would lobby the state to reorganize state law to have, instead of groundwater districts by county or even smaller, to have them by aquifers. So that's just that's really the way it needs to be done. And there has not been the political will to do it, and the governor and others have not supported that.
Yep, yep, that makes sense. That's what we need to look at things. Obviously, the water doesn't go by county lines, so the water has no idea of county lines and county roads, and it flows across the GCDs, and so that's exactly the issue that we have, where groundwater districts are being impacted by outside forces that we cannot control. Yep, and that would certainly change that whole equation. Yes. I
So
do see
Elvis,
a
go ahead.
question
Go
here
ahead.
about the extrapolation about the three-dimensional mapping. Yes, with the three-dimensional mapping, surely there were definitely areas of the county that were extrapolated where there wasn't a lot of data, there wasn't a lot of wells. And so in those, some areas had more extrapolation than others because some geographic areas had more wells and more data to analyze. So yeah, it's the best available science that we have. It's better than what we had, which was nothing. But definitely, as with any model, it's imperfect. Yeah. Yeah, Andy Weir is very knowledgeable. I see that he's answered a bunch of questions. Andy is very involved in groundwater, and he goes to many of these groundwater district meetings. He is the executive director for SAWDEF, which is the Simsboro Aquifer Water Defense Fund. So that's why Andy knows so much. That's how I know Andy. Any other questions?
So Elvis, would you touch a little bit on how does the variety in how each county either appoints or elects their board and how they create their budgets, how does that affect the statewide approach to water conservation?
Well, certain groundwater districts, the smaller ones, have a difficult time funding programs like rainwater harvesting. For example, we just established this past year a rainwater harvesting program, and I know Post Oak has a program like that. Post Oak also has a conservation easement program where they will pay landowners to put their groundwater rights in some sort of conservation easement, and they fund that. But they can do that because they have a big revenue stream coming in from the Vista Ridge project, and they have millions of dollars. So that one program alone is a $1 million program. So you've got these smaller groundwater districts like Andy mentioned, Fayette County. Their whole budget is $90,000. They having $1 million to do a conservation program is just not in the realm of possibility for Fayette County, especially since they're taxpayer funded. So yeah, there are inconsistencies and because each district is groundwater district is so unique.
Yeah, I just, as you pointed out, that water doesn't know our county lines. So when you have various county budgets and approaches, that, like you said, with the water being saved in one place, it's not really saved. It's replenished differently and it's saved differently, but it ultimately affects everyone downstream. So I'm just wondering, as a state, how does that, I mean, there's no There is no fair share.
Well, there is, I mean, the concept exists, and certain groundwater districts have that correlative rights and have these production limits. But what we're finding is that these production limits, what I mentioned earlier, they're typically like 1 to 2 acre feet per acre. Those limits are too much.
Mm-hmm.
They're too generous.
Interesting. Yeah, that really leaves a lot to to think about. It looks like Bryce has another question. Go ahead, Bryce.
Yeah, Elvis, I have a question for you, and I've been out of this work for 10 years now, so I've a lot of things are fuzzy, but I think what your model was showing was your artesian pressure. Now, keep in mind your artesian pressure is not how much water is in that aquifer, it's only the pressure.
Yeah.
And so, sometimes I think that gets confused when you're modeling the artesian pressure, because in the Edwards, for example, the artesian pressure can be low, but the Edwards aquifer is still completely full of water. So how are you and your groups understanding that and putting that out to the public versus the amount of water versus the artesian, because they're pressures which are totally different.
Yeah, these drawdown numbers is a drawdown of pressure. So it's not that the water level, it's the pressure. The aquifers are being depressurized.
Right.
And so,
But the volume of water is not being decreased.
oh yes, it is. Oh yeah, there is water I mean, you're pumping water, right? I mean, you're pumping water out. So obviously you're decreasing the water that's in there, and it's depressurizing. And when you get to zero artesian head, you are basically dewatering the aquifer. And you could still run your pumps, but at that point you need bigger pumps. And it's not the ideal condition to be, but yeah, there's still water down there. I mean, there's water down at 2,000 and 3,000 feet underground. It's super salty. It's about 100 degrees Fahrenheit. It's not something your typical landowner can tap into at 2,000 feet.
But there's still millions of acre feet down there, and because of the speed of the water, the transmissivity and down there in the San Aquifer, it is so much slower. So yes, you
Yep,
have a bad water line, you have encroachment coming up, but again, pressure and volume are two different things.
absolutely. You're right. Oh yeah. I mean, it would be great if folks could start pumping out of the deep areas and start doing brackish groundwater. That would be less impactful because it's further away from the typical domestic well that's 300 or 600 feet. So it would be awesome if these big guys would go down 2,000, 3,000 feet and extract brackish groundwater. It's costly. They'd rather go where it's not deep. They'd rather pump out of the Simsboro where it's 800 feet.
Well, like I said, here in Bexar County, we do have desal, and it is
Yep.
in it's all the brackish water. We do it. We then inject it into the lower levels of the Edwards Aquifer down at the county line with the Wilson Bear
Yep.
line, and it's in the Edwards Aquifer, but it's in the bad water zone, and so there is no impact at all. And
Yep. Yep.
San Antonio is really one of the most successful cities in the nation with their water system.
Yep, they are the model for sure. They are a model to look towards. Absolutely. And that's where we need to, we need to start pursuing alternate sources of water. The unique thing with the San Antonio is that, when you did the ASR, you're doing it local, right? You're not going to your neighboring county and putting in the ASR on your neighbor, right? You're doing it local. So you're keeping that local. So that's the difference between Austin and San Antonio, right? We here in Bastrop, everyone's against the ASR project. Everybody, they would rather that Austin Water, if they want to do it, go ahead and do it in Travis County.
Yeah, but the geology is different and you don't
Uh,
have the ability to do that. So
Yeah,
it's sort
understood,
it's sort
understood.
of, I mean, water is a statewide issue.
Yep.
Only because it's in the ASRs in Bear County makes no difference. It still has no impact on surrounding neighbors.
Yep.
Elvis, we're going to have to close the call now, but this is absolutely fascinating. I think we're all going to have no choice but to become much more conversant and knowledgeable about groundwater. And we appreciate you so much sharing this knowledge with us in such a clear and structured way. I think that this is going to be really helpful to us. We're going to post this recording on our website, so you can go back and watch it again. Thank you, Elvis, for being here tonight. We really appreciate your time and your service to the groundwater of Texas.
My pleasure.
Thank
Thank you.
Good night, everybody.
Good night.